When successful tech CEO Clara Jennings's luxury sedan lost its brakes on the winding descent of Blackstone Ridge, she had seconds to live. The mountain road offered no mercy, just a 1,000-foot drop and certain death. But truck driver Ashton Walsh saw what was happening. Without hesitation, he positioned his 18-wheeler directly in her path, using his own rig as a human shield to bring her vehicle to a grinding halt. The collision saved her life, but destroyed everything Ashton owned: his truck, his livelihood, his only source of income for his daughter back home. When Clara stumbled out of her mangled car, desperate to thank him and offer compensation, Ashton simply made sure she was safe, refused any reward, and disappeared into the night before authorities arrived. What Clara discovered next about the man who sacrificed everything for a stranger would change both their lives forever, and expose a truth neither of them saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Ashton Walsh had been awake for 16 hours straight. But that was nothing new. The dashboard clock of his Peterbilt semi glowed 11:47 p.m. as he navigated the treacherous curves of Blackstone Ridge, a notorious stretch of mountain highway that separated the valley towns from the interstate beyond. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but the rhythm of the road kept him focused. This was his third cross-country haul this month, and each mile meant another dollar toward keeping his daughter's world intact. The weight of responsibility sat heavier on his shoulders than any cargo he'd ever transported. 15-year-old Maya was back home in Creekwood, a small town 3 hours south where they rented a 2-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Patterson's bakery. The rent was overdue again. Maya's school fees were coming up. The refrigerator had been making that horrible grinding noise for 2 weeks, and Ashton knew it was only a matter of time before it gave out completely. But those were problems for tomorrow. Tonight, he just needed to deliver this shipment of industrial equipment to the distribution center in Pinewood and collect his payment. Ashton had been driving trucks for 12 years, but the last 3 had been the hardest. His wife, Jennifer, had passed away from cancer just months after Maya turned 12. The medical bills had crushed them, draining their savings and forcing Ashton to sell their modest house in the suburbs. They'd moved to Creekwood because the cost of living was lower, and Mrs. Patterson had offered them the apartment at a rate Ashton could almost manage. Almost. The trucking company he worked for, Summit Freight Lines, wasn't exactly known for generous pay or reliable benefits. Ashton was technically an independent contractor, which meant no health insurance, no paid time off, and no guarantee of steady work. When loads were available, he took them. When they weren't, he and Maya scraped by on whatever odd jobs he could find around Creekwood. He'd done everything from helping local farmers with harvests to repairing engines at the small garage on Main Street. Maya never complained, and that broke his heart more than anything. She wore the same 3 outfits to school in rotation. Her sneakers had holes in the soles, and she'd quietly declined every invitation to school events that required money. When other teenagers were posting about concerts and shopping trips, Maya was at the public library doing homework or helping Mrs. Patterson in the bakery to earn a few extra dollars. She was smart, brilliant even, with straight A's and a natural talent for mathematics that her teachers said could take her anywhere. But Ashton knew the truth. Without money for college, Maya's potential would stay trapped in Creekwood, just like his own dreams had been. The road curved sharply, and Ashton downshifted, feeling the familiar vibration of the engine as his rig hugged the mountainside. To his right, a guardrail was all that separated the highway from a deadly plunge into the valley below. This stretch of Blackstone Ridge was infamous. Every year, accidents claimed lives here. The combination of steep grades, tight curves, and drivers who didn't respect the mountain's power created a perfect storm of danger. Ashton's CB radio crackled with chatter from other truckers making the night run. They talked about weather conditions, speed traps, and which rest stops had the best coffee. Ashton listened, but didn't join in. He'd learned that the road was a solitary place for men like him, men carrying weights that couldn't be shared over a CB frequency. His phone, mounted on the dashboard, showed a text message from Maya sent 2 hours ago. "Drive safe, Dad. Love you." She always sent those messages before bed, no matter how late. Ashton smiled despite his exhaustion. That girl was the only thing keeping him going. Everything he did, every mile he drove, every hour he sacrificed sleep, it was all for her, to give her a chance at something better, to make sure Jennifer's death hadn't destroyed both of their futures. The truth was, Ashton was barely holding on. The truck he drove wasn't even his anymore. He'd had to sell it 6 months ago to cover Maya's orthodontist bills and was now leasing this Peterbilt from Summit Freight at rates that ate up most of his profit margin. One major mechanical failure, one accident, one missed payment, and he'd lose everything. He'd be just another broke single father with no prospects and a daughter depending on him. But giving up wasn't an option. Jennifer had made him promise during those final days in the hospital when the pain medication couldn't quite mask her fear. "Take care of our girl," she'd whispered, her hand weak in his. "Don't let the world convince her she's less than she is. Promise me." And he had promised. It was a promise that kept him moving when exhaustion screamed at him to stop, when despair whispered that he was failing, when the numbers in his bank account confirmed his worst fears. The elevation began to increase as Blackstone Ridge climbed toward its highest point. Ashton checked his mirrors, noting a few scattered vehicles on the road behind him. Traffic was light at this hour, mostly commercial trucks and the occasional night owl making the mountain crossing. His load of industrial equipment shifted slightly, and he felt the weight distribution in the way the rig handled the curves. Everything was secure. Everything was under control. Ahead, the road straightened for a brief stretch before plunging into a series of switchbacks that would take him down the eastern slope. This was the most dangerous section. The descent was steep, and many drivers made the fatal mistake of riding their brakes too hard, causing them to overheat and fail. Ashton knew better. He'd made this run dozens of times. He would use engine braking, downshift properly, and take his time. There was no cargo worth dying for, no schedule worth risking his life over. As he reached the crest of Blackstone Ridge, Ashton allowed himself one brief thought about the future. Maybe, if he could string together enough good months, he could save enough for Maya's college fund. Maybe she could escape Creekwood and become the mathematician she was meant to be. Maybe Jennifer's death wouldn't have been entirely in vain. These were the thoughts that sustained him, the fragile hopes that made the endless miles bearable. The road began its descent, and Ashton shifted down, feeling the engine's resistance as it helped control his speed. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the painted lines and reflective markers that guided drivers through the treacherous curves. Behind him, another set of headlights appeared, moving fast. Too fast. Ashton watched in his mirror as the vehicle approached, and he could tell immediately that something was wrong. The way it was moving, the erratic speed, the sudden braking, it all screamed danger. Ashton's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His exhaustion vanished, replaced by the sharp focus of a professional driver who'd seen enough accidents to know when tragedy was about to unfold. The The vehicle behind him was accelerating down the mountain, and whoever was driving had lost control. In seconds, Ashton Walsh would have to make a choice that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Clara Jennings had exactly 17 minutes to make her conference call with the Tokyo investors when the first warning light appeared on her dashboard. She was driving her midnight blue Tesla Model S down Blackstone Ridge, returning from a successful business dinner in Lakewood, where she'd secured a crucial partnership deal. As the CEO of Apex Solutions, a rapidly growing cybersecurity firm, Clara lived in a world of high-stakes decisions and constant pressure. Missing this call wasn't an option. At 38 years old, Clara had built her company from a basement startup into a $100 million enterprise with offices in 4 countries. She'd worked 80-hour weeks for a decade, sacrificed relationships, foregone vacations, and pushed herself to the edge of burnout more times than she could count. But success had come at a price. She was wealthy beyond her childhood dreams, but she was also alone. Her marriage had crumbled under the weight of her ambition 5 years ago, and she'd thrown herself even deeper into work to avoid confronting that failure. Tonight should have been a triumph. The partnership with Lakewood Tech meant expansion into new markets and potential revenue streams that would push Apex Solutions into the next tier of industry dominance. Clara had celebrated with a single glass of wine at dinner, feeling for once like she was winning at this impossible game of business warfare. The drive back to her penthouse in Sterling Heights should have been routine. Just 90 minutes on the highway, most of it along Blackstone Ridge's scenic mountain road. The warning light blinked amber on her display screen. Brake system error. Clara frowned and tapped the screen, expecting it to be a sensor malfunction. Teslas were sophisticated machines, but they weren't perfect. She'd had false warnings before. The screen blinked again, this time with more urgency. Brake failure imminent. Seek service immediately. Clara's heartbeat accelerated. She pressed the brake pedal experimentally, and her stomach dropped. There was resistance, but it felt spongy, uncertain. The car was still responding, but something was definitely wrong. She was on a steep descent now, the mountain's eastern slope that wound down through a series of hairpin turns. This was the worst possible place for brake problems. She activated her hazard lights and tried to slow down using the regenerative braking system, but the car's momentum was building. The road curved sharply ahead, and Clara felt the first spike of real fear. She pressed the brake pedal harder. Nothing. The pedal went to the floor with a sickening lack of resistance. No brakes. None at all. Panic exploded in her chest. Clara gripped the steering wheel as her Tesla accelerated down the mountain grade, gravity pulling her faster with every second. The speedometer climbed past 50, then 60. Trees and guardrails blurred past her windows. She tried to downshift using the paddle controls, but the regenerative system couldn't generate enough resistance to slow a vehicle moving this fast on such a steep decline. The road curved ahead, a brutal switchback that required slow speeds and careful navigation. Clara was approaching it at 70 miles per hour with no way to stop. Her mind raced through options. She could try to sideswipe the guardrail. But at this speed, she might flip over it and plunge into the valley. She could aim for the mountain wall on the left, but the impact would likely kill her. Every choice led to death. Her hands trembled violently on the wheel as adrenaline flooded her system. This couldn't be happening. Not tonight. Not when everything was finally coming together. Clara had faced hostile boardrooms, aggressive competitors, and countless business crises. But nothing had prepared her for the raw terror of hurtling toward death with absolutely no control. She fumbled for her phone, trying to call emergency services. But the switchback was coming up fast, and she needed both hands on the wheel. The Tesla's AI assistant kept offering useless suggestions. "Would you like me to contact roadside assistance?" "Yes, you idiot, but they can't help me in the next 10 seconds. Clara navigated the first switchback through pure instinct, her luxury sedan squealing as it barely held the curve. The smell of burning rubber filled the car. She was going to die. That certainty crystallized in her mind with horrible clarity. Clara Jennings, who had conquered every challenge business could throw at her, was going to die on a mountain road in a malfunctioning car. The second switchback appeared ahead, this one even tighter than the first. No chance. Even professional race drivers couldn't take that curve at this speed. Clara's throat tightened as she imagined the moment of impact, the sensation of flying through space as her car left the road, the final seconds of consciousness before everything ended. And then she saw the truck. A massive 18-wheeler was ahead of her on the descent, its running lights glowing red in the darkness. The truck was moving steadily, professionally navigated by someone who knew these roads. Clara's desperate mind latched onto a wild thought. If she could get the driver's attention, maybe somehow he could help. But how? She was seconds from the fatal curve. She flashed her high beams repeatedly and laid on the horn, a continuous, desperate wail that cut through the night. The truck's brake lights flared as the driver responded, clearly aware that something was wrong. But there was nothing he could do. Even if he stopped, Clara would just crash into him at lethal speed. This was it. This was how her story ended. Then the truck did something Clara's panic-fogged mind couldn't immediately process. Instead of pulling over or speeding up, it began to slow down deliberately, positioning itself in the center of the lane directly in her path. The driver was creating an obstacle, using his massive vehicle as a barrier. Was he insane? They'd both be killed in the collision. Clara's Tesla closed the distance in seconds. She could see the truck's trailer clearly now, could read the faded lettering on its side. Summit Freight Lines. Time seemed to slow as her car barreled toward the collision. She thought of her parents, long dead. She thought of her ex-husband, who'd begged her to slow down and enjoy life. She thought of all the moments she'd missed chasing success, all the experiences she'd traded for quarterly earnings reports. The impact was tremendous. Metal screamed against metal as Clara's Tesla slammed into the truck's trailer. The airbags exploded in her face, and the world became a chaos of noise and violence. Her car was pushed sideways by the collision, grinding against the truck as both vehicles skidded together. She could feel the deceleration, the truck's massive weight working like an anchor to slow their combined momentum. The truck driver was doing something incredible. Even as Clara's car crumpled against his trailer, he was controlling the collision, angling his rig to maximize friction while minimizing the chance that either vehicle would lose control completely. It was a master class in emergency driving, executed by someone with nerves of steel and years of experience. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably less than 10 seconds, both vehicles came to a shuddering stop. Clara's car was wedged against the truck's trailer, steam hissing from her destroyed engine compartment. She was alive. Impossibly, inexplicably, she was alive. Her hands were still locked on the steering wheel in a death grip, her body shaking uncontrollably from adrenaline and shock. Through her cracked windshield, Clara saw the truck driver climbing down from his cab. He was moving quickly despite the obvious danger, running back to check on her. In the darkness and confusion, she could only make out his silhouette, a tall figure backlit by the truck's running lights. He was shouting something, his voice muffled by the ringing in her ears. Clara tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. She was frozen in place, her mind struggling to process the fact that she was still breathing. The driver reached her door and yanked it open, the damaged frame protesting with a metallic shriek. His face appeared in her field of vision, weathered and exhausted, but filled with urgent concern. "Are you hurt? Can you move? Talk to me." His voice was rough, commanding, the voice of someone who'd taken charge in countless emergencies. Clara tried to answer, but only a strangled sound emerged. The driver's hands were on her shoulders now, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness given the urgency of the situation. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe. You're safe now." Safe. The word seemed absurd given what had just happened. But Clara felt something break inside her. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of her near death finally hit her. This stranger had sacrificed his truck, his livelihood, possibly his life, to save hers. And she didn't even know his name. Ashton's hands moved on autopilot as he checked Clara for injuries, his training from years of witnessing highway accidents kicking in. She was in shock, that much was clear. But he couldn't see any obvious signs of major trauma. Her airbag had deployed properly, and while she'd be bruised and sore, she appeared to have survived the impact without critical injuries. His own heart was hammering in his chest, adrenaline making his hands shake even as he forced them to remain steady. "My name is Ashton," he said, keeping his voice calm and measured. "You're going to be fine. Can you tell me your name?" He needed to keep her talking, keep her conscious and focused. Shock could be as dangerous as physical injuries if it wasn't managed properly. "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Clara Jennings. My brakes failed. I couldn't stop. I thought I was going to die." The words tumbled out in a rush, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Ashton recognized the signs of trauma response and nodded, his hands still checking her arms and legs for injuries. "You did great, Clara. You kept control as long as you could. That's what saved your life." He glanced back at his truck, and his stomach twisted into knots. The trailer was destroyed, the rear section crumpled like aluminum foil where Clara's Tesla had impacted it. His cargo would be damaged beyond salvage. The truck itself might be totaled. Everything he owned, everything he'd worked for, was now twisted metal on a mountain road. But Clara was alive, and that was what mattered. Ashton had made his choice in that split second when he'd seen her headlights flashing desperately behind him. He could have pulled over, let her crash into the guardrail or the mountain wall, protected himself and his livelihood. But he'd seen the panic in how her car was moving, had recognized the signs of complete brake failure, and his instincts had overridden his self-preservation. He'd positioned his truck as a barrier because it was the only chance she had. Now he had to deal with the consequences. Clara was fumbling with her seatbelt, trying to climb out of the wreckage. Ashton helped her, supporting her weight as she stumbled onto the roadway. Her legs were unsteady, and she leaned heavily against him. The mountain air was cold, and he could see her shivering in her business suit. Whether from temperature or shock, he couldn't tell. "We need to call for help," Clara said, her voice growing stronger. "Ambulance, police, emergency services. My phone is in the car somewhere." She turned to look at the destroyed Tesla and seemed to truly see the damage for the first time. The entire front end was obliterated, The hood crumpled, the windshield a spiderweb of cracks. Oh my God, I should be dead. Ashton pulled out his own phone, but his mind was racing ahead to what came next. Police would arrive. There would be reports, statements, insurance claims. His company would be notified. Summit Freight would see their leased truck destroyed and their cargo ruined. They'd terminate his contract immediately. He'd have no income, no way to make the lease payments, no way to support Maya. The apartment rent was already overdue. Mrs. Patterson had been patient, but she couldn't wait forever. Without this job, without any prospects, he and Maya would be homeless within weeks. His thumb hovered over the emergency call button, but something held him back. Maybe it was the exhaustion that had been building for years. Maybe it was the crushing weight of knowing he'd just destroyed his daughter's future to save a stranger. Maybe it was the simple recognition that he couldn't afford to be here when the authorities arrived. Clara was looking at him now with an expression he'd seen before. Back when he and Jennifer used to be comfortable, back before the medical bills and the poverty. It was the look of someone who had money, lots of it, judging by her expensive car and designer clothes. She was seeing him clearly for the first time, taking in his worn jeans, his faded flannel shirt, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "You saved my life," Clara said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "That truck, your cargo, everything. You sacrificed it all for me. I don't even know how to begin to thank you." She reached for her purse, which had somehow remained on the passenger seat. "Please, let me compensate you. I can pay for the damages, for your truck, for whatever you've lost. I'm the CEO of Apex Solutions. Money isn't an issue. You deserve to be rewarded for what you did." Ashton felt something cold settle in his stomach. Compensation. Reward. The words felt wrong, tainted somehow. He hadn't positioned his truck to be a hero or to get paid. He'd done it because a human being was about to die and he had the power to prevent it. Taking money for that felt like it would cheapen the choice, turn a moment of pure human decency into a transaction. But more than that, Ashton knew how these situations worked. Clara would want to involve her lawyers, her insurance companies, her accountants. There would be paperwork and publicity and attention. His face would be on the news as the heroic truck driver who saved the wealthy CEO. Summit Freight would learn about the incident from reporters instead of from him. The company would see an opportunity for good publicity and would keep him employed just long enough to milk the story before quietly terminating his contract later. And Maya would see her father turned into a spectacle, paraded around as proof that poor people could be noble too. She'd watch strangers dissect their poverty and her father's sacrifice for entertainment. She'd become the truck driver's daughter, defined by this one moment for the rest of her life. Ashton had seen it happen before, the way the media turned real people into characters, the way well-meaning attention could destroy privacy and dignity. "I don't want your money," Ashton said quietly, and he meant it. Clara's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting that response. "I'm just glad you're safe. That's enough." He looked down the road, where he could already see the distant flash of emergency lights. Someone had called it in. Help was coming. "But your truck, your livelihood," Clara protested, following his gaze. "You can't just walk away from this. Let me help you. Please, it's the least I can do." There was desperation in her voice now, and Ashton realized she needed this. She needed to feel like the debt could be settled, like they could both walk away square. "Take care of yourself, Clara," Ashton said, stepping back from her. "Make sure the EMTs check you out properly. You've been through major trauma." He was moving toward the tree line now, putting distance between them. His truck was finished. There was nothing he could do for it. But he could still protect Maya from the circus that was about to descend. "Wait, what's your last name? How can I reach you?" Clara called after him, but Ashton was already disappearing into the darkness of the forest that lined the road. He could hear her shouting, could hear the confusion and distress in her voice. But he kept moving. The emergency vehicles were getting closer, their sirens cutting through the mountain air. Ashton Walsh vanished into the trees, leaving behind his destroyed truck, his ruined cargo, and the woman whose life he'd saved. He had no phone, no money, no plan for what came next. All he knew was that he needed to get back to Creekwood, back to Maya, before the world came looking for him. He'd figure out the rest as he went. He always did. Behind him, Clara Jennings stood alone on the mountain road, staring at the spot where her rescuer had disappeared, feeling like she'd just witnessed something profound that she couldn't quite understand. The man had saved her life, then walked away from everything, including the help she desperately wanted to give him. As the police cars and ambulance arrived, bathing the scene in flashing red and blue lights, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would find Ashton Walsh, and she would repay the debt, whether he wanted her to or not. 3 days after the accident on Blackstone Ridge, Clara Jennings sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Heights Financial Tower, staring at a police report that told her almost nothing. The investigator had been sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. "The truck was registered to Summit Freight Lines, ma'am. The driver was an independent contractor named Ashton Walsh. We've tried to contact him, but he hasn't responded to any of our calls. The company claims they don't know his current whereabouts." Clara had been released from the hospital after 12 hours of observation. Miraculously, she'd escaped with nothing more than bruises, a mild concussion, and severely strained muscles. The doctors had called her lucky, but Clara knew the truth. Luck had nothing to do with it. Ashton Walsh had saved her life through deliberate action and personal sacrifice. And then he disappeared like smoke. Her assistant, Nathan, knocked quietly before entering with yet another stack of documents requiring her signature. "The Tokyo investors confirmed the partnership terms," he said, placing the papers on her desk. "They're asking when you'll be available for the formal signing ceremony." Nathan was efficient, professional, and had been with Clara for 6 years. He knew better than most how she operated, which made his next words all the more pointed. "You should be celebrating. This is what you've been working toward for 2 years. Clara barely glanced at the documents. The partnership that had seemed so crucial 3 days ago now felt hollow, meaningless. She'd been given a second chance at life, and all she could think about was the man who'd given it to her. "Nathan, I need you to find someone for me. His name is Ashton Walsh. He's a truck driver, probably lives somewhere within a few hours of Blackstone Ridge. I need an address, a phone number, anything." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. He'd worked for Clara long enough to know she didn't make frivolous requests. "Is this related to the accident?" Clara nodded, and Nathan's expression softened. The entire office had heard about her near-death experience. Some version of the story had made it into the local news, though thankfully without much detail. "I'll see what I can find. May I ask why you're looking for him?" "Because he saved my life, and then walked away before I could properly thank him," Clara said, and she heard the frustration in her own voice. "He destroyed his truck, lost his cargo, probably lost his job, and he wouldn't even let me help him. I need to make this right, Nathan. I need to find him." Over the next week, Clara threw herself into the search with the same intensity she'd once reserved for business conquests. She hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Paul Richards, who specialized in locating people who didn't want to be found. She personally called Summit Freight Lines and spoke to their operations manager, a gruff man named Bill Henderson, who seemed more concerned about his destroyed truck and ruined cargo than about the driver who'd sacrificed both. Walsh was always reliable, Henderson admitted grudgingly. Never missed a delivery, never complained, worked whatever routes we gave him. But he was leasing that truck from us, and now it's totaled. The cargo belonged to a major client, and they're threatening legal action. Walsh owes us for the lease termination and the cargo loss. He's in breach of contract. Clara felt anger flare in her chest. He saved someone's life. Doesn't that matter to you at all? Henderson's sigh was audible over the phone. Look, lady, I sympathize with what happened. But this is a business. We've got insurance claims to file and contracts to honor. Walsh knew the terms when he signed on. He made a choice, and now there are consequences. That's how the real world works. The real world. Clara had spent her entire adult life in that world, making hard decisions based on profit margins and risk assessments. But something about Henderson's cold calculation made her sick. Ashton Walsh had acted with pure humanity in a moment of crisis, and the systems that governed ordinary lives were punishing him for it. It was wrong on a fundamental level that Clara was only beginning to understand. Paul Richards delivered his initial report 2 weeks after Clara hired him. Found some basic information on Ashton Walsh, the detective said, spreading documents across Clara's conference table. 41 years old, widower, one daughter named Maya, who's 15. They live in Creekwood, a small town about 3 hours south of here. He's been driving trucks for 12 years, but his employment history gets spotty about 3 years ago. Looks like he had some financial difficulties after his wife's death. Clara studied the documents, which included a grainy photo of Ashton from his commercial driver's license. Even in the poor quality image, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried. What else? Paul hesitated, and Clara recognized that look. It was the expression of someone about to deliver bad news. His wife died of cancer. Medical bills wiped them out. They lost their house, had to move to cheaper housing. He's been taking whatever trucking work he can get, but it's not steady. The daughter's got a scholarship application pending for a special math program at Sterling Heights Academy, actually. Smart kid, apparently. Sterling Heights Academy. Clara's own alma mater, one of the most prestigious private schools in the state. The irony wasn't lost on her. Can you get me an address in Creekwood? Paul nodded. Already have it. They rent an apartment above a bakery on Main Street. But Clara, there's something you should know. I made some discreet inquiries. Walsh is in serious financial trouble. The truck company is threatening to sue him for breach of contract. He hasn't made his rent payment in 2 months. He's one bad week away from being homeless. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. While she'd been sitting in her luxury office, signing partnership deals and managing her comfortable life, the man who saved her was facing financial ruin. The injustice of it burned in her chest. I need to help him, she said, and Paul gave her a long, measuring look. That's your choice, but be careful. People in desperate situations can be unpredictable, and some folks have too much pride to accept help, even when they need it. Clara thought about Ashton's face in the darkness, the way he'd refused her offer of compensation, the certainty in his voice when he'd said he didn't want her money. Paul was right. This wasn't going to be as simple as writing a check. But Clara hadn't built $100 million company by accepting obstacles. She'd find a way. 2 days later, Clara made the 3-hour drive to Creekwood in a rental car. Her Tesla was still being evaluated by insurance adjusters, who couldn't quite believe anyone had survived the crash. The drive gave her time to think, to plan what she would say when she finally found Ashton Walsh. She'd rehearsed a dozen different approaches, but they all felt inadequate. Creekwood was exactly the kind of town Clara had spent her life trying to escape. One main street, a handful of local businesses, houses that had seen better days, and an air of quiet desperation that came from economic decline. The bakery was easy to find, a cheerful-looking storefront with hand-painted windows advertising fresh bread and pastries. Clara parked across the street and sat in her car for several minutes, gathering her courage. A young girl emerged from the side entrance of the bakery, and Clara's breath caught. Maya Walsh, she had to be. The resemblance to the photo in Paul's report was unmistakable. But what struck Clara was the girl's demeanor. Maya carried herself with careful dignity. Her clothes clean but obviously worn, her backpack patched with duct tape. She was beautiful in the way teenagers are, all potential and possibility. But there was something in her expression that made Clara's heart ache. It was the look of someone who'd learned too young that the world was hard and resources were scarce. Maya walked down Main Street with purpose, and on impulse, Clara decided to follow at a distance. The girl stopped at the public library, a modest brick building that looked like it had been standing since the town's founding. Through the windows, Clara could see Maya settling at a table with textbooks spread around her, already deep in concentration. This was where she did her homework, Clara realized. Not in a comfortable bedroom with high-speed internet and all the resources money could buy, but in a public library because it was free and warm. Clara felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about repaying a debt anymore. This was about two lives that had intersected in a moment of crisis, two worlds that normally never touched. She thought about her own teenage years, the private tutors and expensive summer programs, the assumption that college was inevitable and success was simply a matter of effort. Maya Walsh was just as smart, probably smarter. But she was fighting with one hand tied behind her back. A woman approached Clara's car, tapping on the window. She was elderly, with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. "You've been sitting out here for a while, dear. Can I help you with something?" It was the voice of someone who'd lived in a small town long enough to notice strangers. Clara rolled down her window and made a snap decision. "I'm looking for Ashton Walsh. I believe he lives above your bakery." The woman's expression immediately became guarded. "Ashton's not in any trouble, is he? He's a good man, just going through a hard time." Clara shook her head quickly. "No trouble. Actually, I owe him a debt. My name is Clara Jennings. He saved my life a few weeks ago on Blackstone Ridge." Recognition flashed across the woman's face. "You're the one from the accident. Ashton mentioned it to me, said he'd been involved in a collision but wouldn't give me details. Stubborn man, too proud for his own good." She studied Clara with sharp eyes. "He's not here right now. Been gone for days, looking for work in Pinewood and Lakewood. The trucking company terminated his contract. He's desperate to find something, anything, before he loses the apartment." The confirmation of Ashton's situation made Clara's determination crystallize into absolute certainty. She would help him, whether he wanted it or not. But she needed to be smart about it. Direct confrontation clearly wouldn't work. Ashton had already demonstrated his willingness to walk away from help. She needed a different approach. "When will he be back?" Clara asked. and the elderly woman shrugged. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. He's been staying in his truck, well, what's left of it, trying to save money on motels. Mrs. Patterson's the name, by the way. I own the bakery. Been trying to give him more time on the rent, but I've got my own bills to pay. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out her business card. Mrs. Patterson, when Ashton returns, please don't tell him I was here. But if he needs anything at all, I want you to call me. Day or night. Mrs. Patterson took the card, examining it with raised eyebrows. CEO of Apex Solutions, you're serious about this debt you owe him. More serious than I've been about anything in a long time, Clara said. She drove back to Sterling Heights that evening with her mind spinning through possibilities. By the time she reached her penthouse, she had the beginnings of a plan. It would require discretion, patience, and a willingness to operate in ways that felt manipulative but served a greater purpose. Ashton Walsh had saved her life. Now Clara Jennings would save his, whether he agreed to it or not. Ashton returned to Creekwood 4 days later with exactly $217 in his pocket and no job prospects. He'd driven to every trucking company, warehouse, and distribution center within 100 miles, filling out applications and sitting through interviews where managers took one look at his recent employment termination and found reasons to pass. The accident on Blackstone Ridge had followed him like a curse. Word traveled fast in the trucking industry. Summit Freight had filed a formal lawsuit against him for breach of contract and destruction of company property. The legal papers had been waiting for him when he'd checked his post office box. Dense paragraphs of legalese that all boiled down to one simple fact. They wanted $47,000 he didn't have. The insurance company was refusing to cover the damages because, according to their interpretation, Ashton had deliberately caused the collision by positioning his truck in Clara's path. Maya was waiting for him in the apartment when he trudged up the stairs, exhaustion making each step feel like climbing a mountain. She looked up from her homework with a smile that nearly broke his heart. Dad, you're back. How did it go? Ashton forced himself to smile in return, dropping his duffel bag by the door. Still looking, sweetheart. But something will turn up. It always does. The lie tasted bitter. Nothing was turning up. His commercial driver's license was still valid, but his reputation was ruined. The lawsuit from Summit Freight would follow him wherever he went. Even if he found work, his wages would be garnished to pay the judgment. They were caught in a trap with no visible exit. Maya set down her pencil, and Ashton could see her doing calculations in her head. His brilliant daughter, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Mrs. Patterson came by earlier. She said we need to talk about the rent. Ashton's stomach clenched. He'd been avoiding that conversation, hoping desperately that he'd find work before it became unavoidable. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Don't worry about it, Maya. Dad, I can get a job, Maya said, and her voice was steady, matter of fact. The grocery store is hiring bag boys. I could work after school and on weekends. It's not much, but it would help. The offer gutted him. His 15-year-old daughter, who should be worried about homework and friends and normal teenage concerns, was volunteering to sacrifice her education to help pay rent. Absolutely not, Ashton said, more sharply than he intended. Your job is school. Your scholarship application for Sterling Heights Academy is due next month. You need to focus on that. Maya's expression flickered, and Ashton saw doubt there. She was smart enough to understand their situation, to recognize that a scholarship to an expensive private school was a fantasy when they couldn't even afford their current apartment. The next morning, Ashton swallowed his pride and went downstairs to talk to Mrs. Patterson. She was arranging fresh pastries in the display case, and she looked up with sympathy when he entered. "Ashton, I'm sorry, but I really need something on the rent. I've given you as much time as I can, but suppliers are asking for payment. I can't keep floating you." "I understand," Ashton said, and he did. Mrs. Patterson had been more generous than she had any obligation to be. "I need one more week. I've got some leads on work in Harborview. If I can just get one good job, I'll pay you everything I owe." It was another lie, or at least an exaggeration. He had one lead in Harborview, a friend of a friend who might need help with furniture moving. It wasn't steady work, but it was something. Mrs. Patterson sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "1 week, Ashton. That's all I can give you. After that, I'll have to ask you to leave." She paused, then added quietly, "You know, there was a woman here asking about you last week. Said you saved her life. She seemed very determined to find you." Ashton's blood went cold. Clara Jennings. Of course she'd tracked him down. Rich people had resources, connections, ways of finding anyone. "If she comes back, tell her I'm not interested in talking. Please, Mrs. Patterson. It's important." The elderly baker gave him a long, searching look. "Ashton Walsh, you're the most stubborn man I've ever met. That woman wants to help you, and Lord knows you need it. Why are you being so pig-headed about this?" Because accepting help from Clara would mean admitting how completely he'd failed. Because it would mean owing a debt he could never repay. Because Maya would learn that her father was the kind of man who needed to be rescued. Instead of answering, Ashton just thanked Mrs. Patterson and headed back upstairs. He spent the rest of the day filling out online job applications, each one feeling more futile than the last. His phone, an ancient model he'd been nursing along for 3 years, buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Mr. Walsh, this is Nathan Chen from Apex Solutions. Ms. Jennings would like to speak with you about a business opportunity. Please call at your earliest convenience." Ashton deleted the message without responding. There was no business opportunity, just charity dressed up in polite language. He wouldn't accept it. He couldn't. The day stretched into evening, and Maya came home from the library with news that made everything worse. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson from the school called. The scholarship application deadline has been moved up. They need everything submitted by next Friday, including the application fee." The application fee, $200 that might as well have been $2 million. Ashton had been planning to scrape it together over the next month, sacrificing groceries and utilities if necessary. But next Friday was impossible. He looked at his daughter's face and saw her trying to hide disappointment, trying to be brave for him. "We'll figure it out," he promised, but the words rang hollow. That night, Ashton couldn't sleep. He sat at their small kitchen table, staring at bills he couldn't pay and applications that wouldn't be answered. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on him, suffocating in their reminder of how small his world had become. He thought about Clara Jennings in her penthouse, probably sleeping peacefully in sheets that cost more than his monthly rent. She thought she could fix his problems with money, but she didn't understand. Money wouldn't change the fundamental truth. Ashton Walsh was a failure who destroyed his own life to save a stranger's. The next morning brought a surprise. Ashton was preparing a meager breakfast when someone knocked on the apartment door. He opened it to find a man in an expensive suit, holding a leather briefcase and looking slightly uncomfortable in the shabby hallway. "Mr. Walsh, my name is James Mitchell. I'm an attorney with Brennan and Associates. May I come in?" Ashton's first thought was that Summit Freight had escalated their lawsuit, but Mitchell's manner wasn't aggressive. He seemed almost apologetic. "Mr. Walsh, I represent an anonymous client who's interested in settling your legal difficulties with Summit Freight Lines. My client is prepared to pay the full amount of the judgment against you, approximately $47,000, in exchange for your agreement to certain terms." The words didn't make sense. Anonymous client. Settlement. Ashton's exhausted brain struggled to process the information. "I don't understand. Who's your client? Why would anyone do this?" Mitchell set his briefcase on the table and pulled out documents. "My client wishes to remain anonymous. The terms are simple. You agree to accept the payment. In exchange, you sign a confidentiality agreement stating that you won't discuss the settlement or attempt to contact my client. All communication must go through me." Clara Jennings, it had to be. Who else would have the resources and the motivation? Ashton felt anger surge through his exhaustion. She'd found another way in, used lawyers and legal maneuvering to force her help on him. "Tell your client I decline. I don't want charity, and I especially don't want it with strings attached." Mitchell didn't seem surprised. "Mr. Walsh, I've been authorized to inform you that if you decline this offer, my client will move forward with an alternative plan. Specifically, they intend to establish a scholarship fund at Sterling Heights Academy, designated for students from Creekwood who demonstrate exceptional aptitude in mathematics. The fund will cover full tuition, room and board, and living expenses." The threat was clear, and it was brilliant. If Ashton refused the personal help, Clara would simply help Maya directly, in a way he couldn't prevent. She was backing him into a corner, using his daughter as leverage. "That's manipulative," Ashton said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Tell your client that holding my daughter's future hostage is not okay." Mitchell's expression remained neutral and professional. "My client anticipated your reaction. They asked me to remind you that your daughter's application deadline is next Friday, and the fee is $200. They also wanted you to know that this isn't about obligation or debt. It's about giving a young person the opportunities she deserves. Your pride shouldn't stand in the way of her future." The words hit home because they were true. Ashton's stubborn refusal to accept help was hurting Maya. But signing those papers felt like surrender, like admitting that he couldn't take care of his own family. Mitchell was watching him carefully, and Ashton realized the lawyer had probably handled difficult clients before. "I need time to think about this." "You have until Friday," Mitchell said, gathering his documents. "After that, the offer expires, and my client will move forward with the scholarship fund regardless of your decision. They're determined to help, Mr. Walsh. The only question is whether you'll allow them to help you directly or force them to work around you." After Mitchell left, Ashton sat in stunned silence, the apartment suddenly feeling even smaller than before. Maya came out of her bedroom, where she'd clearly been listening. "Dad, who was that man? What's going on?" Ashton looked at his daughter, at the hope and fear warring in her expression, and felt something break inside him. How had his life come to this? 3 weeks ago, he'd been barely surviving but maintaining his dignity. Now he was being maneuvered by wealthy people who thought money could solve everything. "Someone who wants to help us," Ashton said finally. "Someone I saved from an accident. She's trying to repay the favor, but I don't want to accept." Maya crossed the room and sat down across from him, her young face suddenly looking much older. "Dad, I know you're proud. I know you want to take care of me on your own. But maybe it's okay to accept help sometimes. Maybe that's not weakness. It's just being human." The wisdom in her words shamed him. When had his 15-year-old daughter become wiser than him? Ashton reached across the table and took her hand, his throat tight with emotion. I just want to give you a good life, sweetheart. I want you to have the chances I never had. But I keep failing you. You're not failing me? Maya said firmly. You saved someone's life, Dad. You risked everything to help a stranger. That's not failure. That's who you are. And if that person wants to help us now, maybe that's just the universe balancing things out. She squeezed his hand. Take the help, Dad. Let me go to that school. Let yourself stop carrying all of this alone. Ashton spent the next 3 days wrestling with the decision. He walked the streets of Creekwood, haunted by the memory of Clara's face on that mountain road, her desperate gratitude and his own stubborn refusal. He thought about Jennifer, about the promise he'd made to take care of Maya. Would his late wife want him to refuse help that could change their daughter's life? Or would she tell him to swallow his pride and do what was best for Maya? On Friday morning, Ashton called the number on James Mitchell's business card. I'll accept the terms, he said, the words feeling like both defeat and liberation. But I want one condition added. If Maya gets into Sterling Heights Academy, I work for whatever scholarship fund your client establishes. Maintenance, security, whatever they need. I don't take charity without giving something back. Mitchell was quiet for a moment, then said, I'll communicate your terms to my client. I suspect they'll find them acceptable. 2 hours later, Mitchell called back. The deal was done. Summit Freight's lawsuit would be settled, Maya's application fee would be paid, and Ashton would have a job offer waiting for him, pending Maya's acceptance to the academy. That evening, Ashton helped Maya finish her scholarship application, watching her brilliant mind tackle complex mathematical problems with ease. She was going to get in. He knew it with absolute certainty. And when she did, their lives would change forever. But as he watched his daughter work, Ashton couldn't shake the feeling that he owed Clara Jennings more than money could ever repay. She'd given him something he'd lost years ago. Hope. 6 weeks after the settlement, Clara Jennings received a call from Sterling Heights Academy's admissions director, Victoria Hartwell. Ms. Jennings, I wanted to personally thank you for establishing the Creekwood Mathematics Scholarship. The first recipient has been selected, and I think you'll be very pleased. Maya Walsh scored in the 99th percentile on our entrance examination. Her application essay was extraordinary. Clara had been expecting this news, but hearing it confirmed still brought a rush of satisfaction. She'd been careful to keep her distance, working through intermediaries to ensure Ashton never felt she was directly interfering. But she'd followed Maya's progress closely, impressed by the girl's determination and brilliance. That's wonderful news. When does she start? Victoria explained the logistics, the orientation schedule, the dormitory assignment. Sterling Heights Academy was a boarding school, which meant Maya would live on campus during the academic year. The separation would be hard on Ashton. Clara knew, but it would also give Maya opportunities that Creekwood could never provide. Clara had structured the scholarship to include everything: tuition, room and board, textbooks, supplies, even a modest stipend for personal expenses. Maya would never feel like the poor scholarship student. She would have everything her peers had. As for Ashton, Clara had been true to his requested terms. He'd been hired as the maintenance supervisor for the Academy's facilities department, a position that came with a salary significantly higher than his trucking income, health insurance, and a small apartment on campus. He could see Maya regularly without her having to leave school. It was the perfect solution, elegant in its simplicity. But Clara wanted more than elegant solutions. She wanted to see Ashton again, to talk to him face to face without lawyers and intermediaries. She wanted to understand why he'd walked away on that mountain road, why he'd fought so hard against accepting help. So she did something impulsive and probably inappropriate. She drove to Sterling Heights Academy on the day of new student orientation, knowing Ashton would be there with Maya. The campus was beautiful in late August, tree-lined pathways connecting historic brick buildings that spoke of tradition and excellence. Clara found herself feeling nervous as she walked toward the administration building, which was absurd. She'd negotiated with hostile investors, fired incompetent executives, and delivered presentations to thousands of people without breaking a sweat. But the thought of facing Ashton Walsh made her palms sweat. She found him near the dormitories, helping Maya carry boxes up to her new room. He looked different than he had on the mountain road. The crushing exhaustion was gone from his face, replaced by something lighter, but also more complicated. He was wearing clean work clothes with a Sterling Heights Academy maintenance department patch on the chest. When he saw Clara approaching, his expression shuddered immediately. Maya noticed her father's reaction and followed his gaze. The girl's eyes widened with recognition, even though they'd never met. Clara realized that Maya must have seen photos from the news coverage of the accident, the brief media attention before Clara's lawyers had shut it down. "You're Miss Jennings," Maya said, and there was awe in her voice. "The woman my dad saved." Clara smiled, trying to project warmth despite Ashton's obvious discomfort. "I am. And you must be Maya. I've heard incredible things about your mathematical abilities. Congratulations on your scholarship." Maya glanced between Clara and her father, clearly picking up on the tension. "Thank you for everything you've done for us. The scholarship, the job for my dad, all of it. We know it was you, even though you tried to keep it anonymous." So much for discretion. Clara had underestimated how smart this girl was. "I'm glad I could help. Your father gave me a gift more valuable than anything money can buy. This is the least I could do in return." Ashton was silent, his jaw tight, and Clara recognized that look. He was controlling his anger, fighting the urge to confront her publicly. "Maya, why don't you head up to your room and start unpacking?" Ashton said quietly. "I need to speak with Miss Jennings for a moment." Maya nodded, her eyes darting between them with concern. "Don't be too hard on her, Dad. She's trying to help." After Maya disappeared into the dormitory, Ashton turned to Clara with barely restrained frustration in his expression. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low but intense. "You've done what you wanted. My debts are paid. Maya's taken care of. There's no reason for you to be here." Clara had prepared for this reaction, but it still stung. "I came because I wanted to see you, to thank you properly, face to face, without lawyers and legal agreements between us." "You've thanked me," Ashton said. "With $47,000 and a job I didn't ask for. We're even. You don't owe me anything else." The words were meant to dismiss her, to push her away. But Clara heard something underneath them. Pain, shame, the complicated emotions of someone who'd been forced to accept help against their will. "We're not even," Clara said softly. "We'll never be even, Ashton. You saved my life. Not my car, not my possessions, my actual life. I was seconds from death, and you put yourself in harm's way to stop that. Do you have any idea what that means to me?" Ashton looked away, his hands clenched at his sides. "I did what anyone would have done in that situation." "No," Clara said firmly. "Most people would have gotten out of the way. Most people would have protected themselves and let me crash. You made a different choice, and it cost you everything you had. Your truck, your job, your financial stability. You sacrificed it all for a stranger. And then you walked away, before I could even learn your name. I walked away because I didn't want this, Ashton said, gesturing at the campus around them. I didn't want to be your charity project. I didn't want my daughter's future to depend on the guilt of a rich woman who felt she owed me something. I wanted to take care of my family on my own terms. The honesty was brutal, but Clara appreciated it. At least they were finally having a real conversation instead of communicating through intermediaries. And how was that working out for you? You were about to lose your apartment. Maya was about to lose her shot at a proper education. Your stubborn pride was hurting the person you love most. Ashton flinched as if she'd struck him, and Clara immediately regretted the harshness of her words. I'm sorry. That was unfair. But Ashton, please try to understand. What you gave me wasn't just my life. You gave me a chance to be better, to use my resources for something that actually matters. Do you know what I do all day? I make rich people richer. I solve problems that only exist in boardrooms and quarterly reports. It's empty. It's always been empty. But I never let myself acknowledge that until you showed me what real courage looks like. Ashton's expression softened slightly, some of the anger draining away. You think I'm courageous? I'm broke, desperate, and working a maintenance job because I destroyed my own career. That's not courage. That's just the consequences of a stupid decision. It wasn't stupid, Clara insisted. It was the most human thing I've ever witnessed. You saw someone in trouble and you helped them, even though it meant sacrificing everything. That's not stupidity. That's heroism in its purest form. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them. And maybe I did feel guilty at first. Maybe I did see this as a debt to be repaid. But it's become something more than that. I want to know you, Ashton. I want to understand the kind of person who makes choices like you made that night. Ashton was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to determine whether she was sincere. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what it's like to watch your wife die because you can't afford better treatment. You don't know what it's like to see your daughter wearing clothes from thrift stores while her classmates have everything. You don't know what it's like to fail every single day and still have to get up the next morning and try again. The pain in his words was raw and real, and Clara felt tears sting her eyes. You're right. I don't know those things. I've lived in a bubble of privilege my entire life. But I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like to realize that everything you've built is empty if you have no one to share it with. I know what it's like to wonder if your life has any real meaning beyond the numbers in your bank account. Ashton's expression shifted, surprise replacing some of the anger. You're worth $100 million and you're telling me you feel empty? Clara laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Money doesn't fix loneliness, Ashton. It doesn't give your life purpose or meaning. It just makes you comfortable while you're miserable. I've spent 20 years chasing success, and you want to know what I've learned? Success is the loneliest achievement there is. They stood there in the late summer afternoon, two people from completely different worlds who'd been thrown together by chance and circumstance. Around them, families were helping students move into dormitories, parents hugging their teenagers goodbye, the normal rhythms of academic life proceeding as they always had. But for Clara and Ashton, everything had changed. What do you want from me? Ashton finally asked, and his voice was tired, all the fight draining out of him. Why are you really here? Clara took a breath, preparing to speak a truth she'd only recently recognized. I want to be friends. I want to know Maya and watch her succeed. I want to understand how you've managed to raise such an incredible person while dealing with circumstances that would have broken most people. And maybe, if you'll let me, I want to learn from you. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot what it means to be human. You reminded me. Ashton's eyes searched her face, looking for deception or manipulation, but Clara kept her expression open and honest. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't lie to him. Finally, slowly, some of the tension left his shoulders. I don't know how to be friends with someone like you. We don't live in the same world. Then maybe we create a new world, Clara suggested. One where a truck driver and a CEO can sit down and have coffee without worrying about who owes whom what. One where my resources can help people who deserve it without strings attached. One where your courage and my means can actually make a difference. She smiled, feeling hope for the first time in years. What do you say, Ashton? Can we at least try? Ashton didn't answer immediately, but Clara saw something shift in his expression. Acceptance, maybe, or at least the willingness to consider possibilities he'd previously rejected. Maya would never forgive me if I said no, he finally admitted, and there was the ghost of a smile on his tired face. She's been talking non-stop about wanting to thank you properly. She's got this whole speech planned out. Clara laughed, genuine joy bubbling up. Then let's not disappoint her. How about dinner tonight, the three of us? Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk without all the baggage of debts and obligations. Ashton hesitated one more moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, dinner. But I'm paying. Clara started to protest, then recognized that this was important to him. Deal, you pick the place. As she walked back to her car, Clara felt lighter than she had in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Ashton was proud and damaged, carrying wounds that money couldn't heal. But for the first time since that night on Blackstone Ridge, she had hope that something good could come from the tragedy they'd both survived. She'd saved his livelihood. Now maybe together they could save each other from the different kinds of poverty they'd both been living with. The restaurant Ashton chose was a small Italian place on the edge of Sterling Heights, the kind of establishment that had checkered tablecloths and family photos on the walls. Clara arrived first, deliberately casual in jeans and a sweater, nothing that would scream wealth or privilege. When Ashton and Maya walked in, she saw the girl's eyes light up with excitement barely contained. Maya was dressed in new clothes, probably purchased for the academy orientation, and she carried herself with a mixture of confidence and nervousness that Clara found endearing. Ashton looked uncomfortable in the restaurant setting, his work-worn hands fidgeting with the menu as they sat down. This was a man more at ease in truck stops and diners than places with cloth napkins. Ms. Jennings, I wanted to tell you that I've already started my placement tests at the academy. Maya began, the words tumbling out in a rush. They're evaluating which level mathematics courses I should take, and the coordinator said I might be able to skip directly to advanced calculus. Can you believe that? Advanced calculus as a sophomore. Clara smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. That's incredible, Maya. Your father told me you were brilliant, but I had no idea just how talented you are. She glanced at Ashton, who was watching his daughter with obvious pride mixed with something else. Sadness, perhaps, at how quickly Maya was moving into a world he couldn't fully understand. The dinner conversation flowed more easily than Clara had expected. Maya asked intelligent questions about Clara's company, about cybersecurity and technology trends, displaying a mind that made connections across disciplines. Ashton remained quieter. but Clara noticed him relaxing gradually as the evening progressed. He even smiled a few times at Maya's animated descriptions of her new dormitory and the other students she'd met. When Maya excused herself to use the restroom, Clara and Ashton were left alone at the table. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. "She's extraordinary," Clara said finally. "You've raised an amazing person, Ashton. Whatever else you think about your life, that's an accomplishment that matters more than anything." Ashton nodded slowly, his eyes following Maya's path through the restaurant. "She's the only thing I got right. Everything else has been a disaster. But Maya turned out perfect despite me, not because of me." Clara shook her head. "I don't believe that. Kids don't become who Maya is without good parenting. She has your strength, your integrity. Those aren't accidents." "My integrity," Ashton repeated, and there was bitterness in his voice. "Is that what you call it when a man can't pay his rent? When he has to accept charity from strangers?" Clara leaned forward, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Your integrity is what made you position that truck to save my life. Your integrity is what made you walk away from compensation because you didn't want it to be transactional. Your integrity is why you're working maintenance instead of taking money you feel you didn't earn. Stop punishing yourself for being human." Ashton met her eyes, and Clara saw the exhaustion there, the weight of years spent barely surviving. "You make it sound noble. It's not. It's just stubbornness and pride, and both those things nearly destroyed my daughter's future." Before Clara could respond, Maya returned, sliding back into her seat with a knowing look that suggested she understood they'd been talking about her. Over the next few weeks, an unexpected pattern developed. Clara found herself driving to Sterling Heights Academy more frequently than her schedule really allowed. She told herself it was to check on the scholarship program, to ensure Maya was settling in properly. But the truth was more complicated. She looked forward to conversations with Ashton, brief encounters in the campus maintenance office, or chance meetings on the pathways between buildings. Ashton was unlike anyone in Clara's usual circle. He didn't care about her company's stock price or her connections to powerful people. He treated her as just another person, sometimes with suspicion, often with surprising insight. He noticed things others missed, the way she avoided questions about her personal life, the exhaustion she tried to hide behind expensive clothes and perfect makeup. One October afternoon, Clara found Ashton repairing a bench near the mathematics building. He was focused on his work, replacing rotted wood with careful precision. She watched for a moment before announcing her presence. "You're good at that," she observed, and Ashton looked up with a slight smile. "Fixing things is easier than fixing people," he said, testing the stability of the new board. "Wood doesn't have complicated emotions or stubborn pride." Clara laughed and sat down on the grass nearby, not caring that her expensive pants would get stained. "Is that a commentary on our friendship, or just general philosophy?" Ashton paused, considering. "Can I ask you something? Why do you keep coming here? Maya's doing great. The scholarship is working exactly as planned. You don't need to check on us." Clara had been expecting this question, but she still didn't have a perfect answer. "Maybe I'm lonely. Maybe I like talking to someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty. Maybe saving my life created a connection I don't fully understand, but don't want to lose." The vulnerability in her admission seemed to surprise Ashton. He set down his tools and sat on the bench he'd been repairing. "I've been thinking about that night on the mountain, about why I put the truck in your path. It wasn't heroic or calculated. I just saw someone about to die and I couldn't let that happen. It was instinct, maybe stupidity. Not stupidity, Clara insisted. Compassion. The rarest thing in the world, especially when it costs you everything. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching students hurry between classes. Clara felt something shift in her understanding of what mattered. For years, she'd measured her life in achievements and acquisitions. But sitting on the grass next to a maintenance worker who'd saved her life, she felt more content than she had in any boardroom victory. Maya invited me to her first mathematics competition next month, Clara said. Would it be okay if I came? I know you'll be there, but I don't want to intrude on family time. Ashton's expression softened. You're not intruding. Maya talks about you constantly. You've become important to her, some kind of role model for what women can achieve in business. She'd be disappointed if you didn't come. And what about you? Clara asked. Would you be disappointed? Ashton met her eyes, and Clara saw honesty there without the usual defensive walls. No, I'd be glad you came. You're not what I expected, Clara Jennings. You're complicated and driven and kind of exhausting, but you're also real. That matters. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at the simple compliment. You're not what I expected either. I thought you'd be grateful and deferential, easy to help and easier to forget. Instead, you're stubborn and infuriating, and you make me question everything about how I've lived my life. It's uncomfortable and necessary, and I wouldn't change it. Maya's competition arrived on a bright November Saturday. Clara sat in the audience between Ashton and Mrs. Patterson, who'd driven up from Creekwood to support her former tenant's daughter. The problems displayed on the screen were incomprehensible to Clara. Complex equations and proofs that might as well have been written in another language. But Maya worked through them with focused intensity, her pen moving confidently across the paper. When the results were announced and Maya placed second in the entire regional competition, Clara found herself cheering alongside Ashton, both of them on their feet with genuine pride. Maya's face glowed with accomplishment as she accepted her medal. After the ceremony, she ran to her father first, then surprised Clara with a fierce hug. Thank you for being here, Maya whispered. Both of you. I know this isn't easy, Dad dealing with you being around, you trying to figure out how to help without making it weird. But it matters to me. You both matter to me. Clara felt tears threaten and blinked them back. When had this brilliant teenager become so important to her? When had Ashton's quiet strength become something she looked forward to? That evening, the three of them celebrated at a modest restaurant Maya chose. The conversation flowed easily now. Months of awkwardness worn away by repeated encounters. Ashton told stories about Maya's early fascination with numbers, how she'd counted everything as a toddler. Maya teased her father about his terrible cooking. Clara shared carefully edited versions of her business challenges, making them entertaining rather than intimidating. As they left the restaurant, Maya walked ahead to the car, and Clara found herself alone with Ashton under the streetlights. Thank you for letting me be part of this, she said quietly. For letting me into your lives, even though I forced my way in at the beginning. Ashton was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I'm glad you forced your way in. I was so focused on protecting my pride that I couldn't see what Maya needed. You gave her opportunities I never could have provided. That matters more than my stupid ego. Clara reached out and touched his arm, a brief contact that felt significant. You gave her something I never could. A father who loves her unconditionally, who models integrity and sacrifice. Money can't buy that, Ashton. It's priceless. They stood there in the cool November air. Two people from different worlds who'd found unexpected common ground. Whatever this relationship was becoming, Clara knew it was changing her in fundamental ways she was only beginning to understand. December brought the first real test of the fragile friendship between Clara and Ashton. It started with a phone call from James Mitchell, the attorney who'd handled the original settlement. "Ms. Jennings, we have a situation. Summit Freight Lines is making noise about additional damages. They're claiming that the publicity from the accident hurt their reputation, and they're seeking compensation beyond the original settlement." Clara felt anger spike through her. They already got their money. The settlement was clear and comprehensive. What more do they want? Mitchell's sigh was audible over the phone. "They want another $30,000, or they're threatening to file a new lawsuit naming both you and Mr. Walsh. They're claiming that the collision was a collaborative effort to defraud their insurance company." The accusation was absurd, but Clara knew that didn't matter. Lawsuits were expensive and time-consuming, even when you won. And dragging Ashton back into legal proceedings would destroy the stability he'd finally achieved. "Fight it," Clara said immediately. "Get the best litigation team we have. I'm not letting them exploit Ashton again." But when she drove to the academy to warn Ashton about the potential lawsuit, his reaction surprised her. They met in his small campus apartment, a modest space that he'd made comfortable with secondhand furniture and photos of Maya. When Clara explained the situation, Ashton's face went pale. "This is my fault. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. Companies like Summit Freight don't just walk away from opportunities to extract more money." "This isn't your fault," Clara insisted. "They're being predatory opportunists. My legal team will handle it." Ashton shook his head, frustration clear in his expression. "Your legal team, your money, your resources fixing problems in my life. Do you see the pattern here, Clara? I'm like a broken machine you keep repairing. Except, I never actually get fixed. I just create new problems for you to solve." The words stung because Clara could hear the pain behind them. "That's not how I see this. That's not how I see you." Ashton stood and paced the small apartment, his movements agitated. "Then how do you see me? The poor truck driver you saved from poverty? Your good deed for the year? The project that makes you feel better about your wealth?" Clara felt her own anger rising to meet his. "That's unfair, and you know it. I care about you and Maya. This isn't about guilt or charity anymore. It's about protecting people I've come to value." Ashton stopped pacing and faced her directly. "But that's the problem. You can protect us because you have money and power. I can't protect you from anything. I can't even protect my own daughter without your help." What kind of relationship is that? It's not friendship. It's not even. It's just you rescuing me over and over again. The conversation was spinning into dangerous territory, touching on insecurities neither of them had fully acknowledged. Clara took a breath, trying to find the right words. "You saved my life, Ashton. You can't protect me from lawsuits or business challenges, but you protected me from death. That's not nothing. And maybe what I'm learning is that protection comes in different forms. You've protected me from loneliness, from forgetting what actually matters in life." Ashton's expression softened slightly, but the tension remained. "I don't know how to do this, Clara. I don't know how to accept help without feeling like I'm failing. I don't know how to be friends with someone from your world without constantly being reminded of how different our lives are." Clara moved closer, closing the physical distance between them. "Then we figure it out together. We make mistakes and apologize and try again. That's what real relationships are, Ashton. Messy and complicated and sometimes uncomfortable. Before Ashton could respond, Maya knocked and entered, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She stopped immediately, picking up on the tension in the room. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Ashton and Clara exchanged glances, and Clara made a decision. "Summit Freight is causing problems. They want more money, and they're threatening to involve your father in another lawsuit. But we're handling it." Maya looked between them, her intelligent eyes assessing the situation. "This is about more than the lawsuit, isn't it? You two are fighting about Dad's pride again." The observation was so accurate and so bluntly delivered that both adults were momentarily speechless. Maya set down her backpack and crossed her arms. "Look, I know I'm just the kid here, but can I say something?" "You're not just anything," Clara said gently. "Say whatever you need to say." Maya took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Dad, you saved Ms. Jennings's life because that's who you are. You help people even when it costs you everything. Why is it so hard for you to let someone help us back? Is your pride really worth making everyone miserable?" Ashton flinched at his daughter's directness. "It's not that simple, Maya." The teenager's expression was firm, more mature than her 15 years. "It is that simple. Miss Jennings isn't trying to make you feel bad about accepting help. She's trying to be a friend. But you keep pushing her away because you're scared. Scared that needing help makes you weak, or that owing someone something makes you less of a man. But Dad, you're the strongest person I know, and accepting help doesn't change that." The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Clara saw moisture in Ashton's eyes as he looked at his daughter, this brilliant, compassionate person he'd raised against all odds. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Maya smiled. "I learned from you. You taught me that being strong means doing what's right, even when it's hard. Well, letting people care about you is hard, but it's still right." Clara felt her own throat tighten with emotion. This family, with their fierce love and complicated pride, had become more important to her than any business success. "Maya's right," she said softly. "I'm not trying to rescue you, Ashton. I'm trying to be present for people I care about. That's what friends do." Ashton was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with years of conditioning that told him self-sufficiency was the only honorable path. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, handle the lawsuit. But I'm paying you back when I can. Even if it takes years, even if you tell me not to. That's my condition for accepting your help this time." Clara wanted to argue, but she recognized that this was important to Ashton's sense of self. "Fine. But you pay me back by being my friend, by letting me be part of Maya's life, by showing up when I need someone to remind me what actually matters. That's the currency I value." Maya grinned, clearly pleased with the resolution. "Good. Now that we've solved that, can we talk about my winter break plans? Because I was thinking I could maybe do an internship at Apex Solutions, just shadowing in your IT department to see how real cybersecurity works." Clara laughed, the tension breaking. "Absolutely, I'll set it up. But be warned, my IT team is intense. They might put you to work." "Good," Maya said with confidence. "I want to work." As the evening progressed into discussion of Maya's academic progress and Clara's latest business challenges, the earlier conflict faded into something manageable. But Clara knew they'd crossed an important threshold. Ashton had finally begun to accept that asking for help wasn't weakness, and Clara had acknowledged that her wealth created complicated dynamics that required careful navigation. Later, as Clara prepared to leave, Ashton walked her to her car. The December air was cold, their breath visible in the streetlight. "Thank you," Ashton said quietly, "for understanding why this is hard for me, for not giving up when I push you away." Clara smiled. "Thank you for saving my life, for showing me that success without connection is hollow, for being stubborn and infuriating and making me work to be your friend." Ashton returned the smile, and Clara noticed how it transformed his face, erasing years of exhaustion. "Friends," he repeated, testing the word. "I guess we are, aren't we? Despite everything." Clara nodded. Despite everything, or maybe because of everything. The collision brought us together, but everything since then has been a choice. We keep choosing each other, even when it's difficult. As she drove back to Sterling Heights, Clara reflected on how much had changed since that night on Blackstone Ridge. She'd set out to repay a debt and instead had found something far more valuable than clean accounts. She found connection, purpose, and the beginning of understanding that wealth meant nothing without people to share it with. Spring arrived at Sterling Heights Academy with flowering trees and the energy of students anticipating summer break. Maya had completed her first year with perfect grades and had become something of a minor celebrity in the mathematics department. Her teachers spoke of her potential in hushed, reverent tones, comparing her to prodigies who'd gone on to prestigious universities and groundbreaking careers. Clara attended Maya's end-of-year mathematics showcase, where the teenager presented research she'd conducted on cryptographic algorithms. The presentation was technically complex, but Maya had a gift for making difficult concepts accessible. Clara found herself genuinely fascinated, not just proud, but intellectually engaged in a way her business rarely provided anymore. Ashton stood next to Clara during the presentation, and she noticed how relaxed he'd become over the months. The defensive tension that had characterized their early interactions had mellowed into something comfortable. They'd fallen into a pattern of regular dinners, sometimes including Maya, sometimes just the two of them, talking about everything from philosophy to favorite movies. After the showcase, Maya approached them with an announcement that took both adults by surprise. "I've been offered a summer research position at the National Mathematics Institute. It's in Capital City, and it's a huge honor. Only 10 high school students nationally were selected." Her excitement was palpable, but there was also uncertainty in her eyes as she looked at her father. Ashton's face showed a complex mixture of pride and concern. "Capital City is 8 hours away. That's a long distance." Maya nodded. "I know, but it's an incredible opportunity. The research we'd be doing could lead to publications, maybe even a head start on college applications. Professor Hartwell says I'd be foolish not to take it." Clara saw the struggle in Ashton's expression. He wanted what was best for Maya, but letting her go so far away clearly hurt. "What do you want to do?" he asked his daughter. And Clara admired how he framed the question, making it about Maya's choice rather than his own fears. "I want to go," Maya admitted. "But I don't want you to be alone all summer, Dad. You've already sacrificed so much for me." Ashton pulled his daughter into a hug, and Clara looked away to give them privacy in the crowded auditorium. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. This is what we've been working toward. You getting opportunities to use your brilliant mind. Don't worry about me." But later, when Maya had gone to celebrate with her friends, Ashton's facade cracked. He and Clara were walking the campus paths in the late afternoon sun when he finally spoke. "I'm terrified. She's only 15, and she's going to be across the country doing research I don't understand. What if something happens? What if she needs me and I can't get there in time? Clara understood the fear beneath the words. Ashton had nearly lost everything, protecting his daughter, and now she was growing beyond his ability to shield her. She's ready for this, Clara said gently. You raised her to be independent and confident. Now you have to trust that foundation you built. I know, Ashton said, but his voice was heavy. It's just happening so fast. 1 minute she's a little girl counting her fingers, the next she's presenting cryptographic research to professors. Where did the time go? Clara felt a pang of sympathy for what Ashton was experiencing. The bittersweet pride of watching someone you love outgrow their need for your protection. You won't be alone this summer, Clara found herself saying. I mean, if you want company. We could finally tackle that reading list we keep talking about. Maybe take some day trips to places neither of us have been. Ashton looked at her with surprise and something else, something warmer. You'd want to spend your summer with me? Don't you have a company to run? Clara smiled. I have excellent people running that company. And I've been thinking about stepping back, maybe focusing on ventures that feel more meaningful. The scholarship program has been so rewarding. I've been considering expanding it, creating opportunities in other fields beyond mathematics. She paused, then added, I could use a partner in that. Someone who understands what it's like to fight for opportunities most people take for granted. The suggestion hung between them, more significant than Clara had initially intended. Ashton was quiet, processing the implications. A partner, he repeated. You want me to help run your charitable programs? Clara, I fix toilets and repair benches. I don't know anything about nonprofits or philanthropy. You know what matters, Clara countered. You understand what people actually need versus what rich donors think they need. That perspective is invaluable. And honestly, I'm tired of making decisions in isolation. I want someone I trust to challenge my assumptions. Ashton's expression showed he was tempted but uncertain. I'd need to keep my job here. Maya will be back in the fall, and I need to be on campus for her. We'd work around that, Clara assured him. Part-time consulting, flexible hours, whatever makes sense for your life. She felt nervous making the offer, vulnerable in a way that business negotiations never made her. This wasn't about filling a position. This was about creating a structure that would keep Ashton in her life permanently. Over the following weeks, as Maya prepared for her summer program, Clara and Ashton began planning what their partnership might look like. They met in coffee shops and walked through parks, discussing values and priorities. Clara was surprised by how much she valued Ashton's input, how his perspective forced her to think beyond surface solutions to systemic problems. When the day came for Maya to leave for Capital City, both Clara and Ashton drove her to the bus station. The teenager hugged her, father tightly, whispering something that made Ashton's eyes water. Then she turned to Clara and embraced her as well. Take care of him, Maya said quietly. He pretends to be tough, but he's actually a softie. Don't let him spend the whole summer working and forgetting to eat. Clara laughed through her own tears. I promise. And you take care of yourself. Call us whenever you need anything. As the bus pulled away, Clara and Ashton stood side by side, waving until Maya disappeared from view. The emptiness that followed felt shared, both of them facing a summer without the brilliant girl who'd become central to both their lives. Well, Ashton said finally, I guess it's just us now. Clara smiled, feeling nervous and hopeful simultaneously. Just us. Ready to change the world through philanthropy? Ashton laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Not even close. But I'm ready to try. They spent that summer building something neither had planned, but both needed. The scholarship program expanded to include vocational training for students who weren't college-bound, but deserved opportunities nonetheless. They visited communities, talked to families, listened to stories that broke their hearts and inspired their work. Clara discovered that Ashton had an intuitive understanding of people's needs that her business education had never taught her. He could walk into a struggling neighborhood and immediately identify what would actually help versus what sounded good in grant proposals. And Ashton found that Clara's resources, combined with his insight, could create real change in people's lives. Their friendship deepened into something neither wanted to name, but both recognized. There were moments of accidental contact that lingered too long, conversations that went past midnight, shared jokes that created intimacy through repetition. But neither pushed for more, both content with the connection they'd built. When Maya returned in August, taller and more confident from her summer experience, she immediately noticed the change between her father and Clara. "So," she said at their reunion dinner, her tone deliberately casual, "are you two dating yet? Or are you still pretending you're just friends?" Both adults sputtered protests, but Maya just grinned. "I'm 15, not blind. You text each other constantly. You light up when you talk about each other. Dad actually laughs now, and Miss Jennings looks happy instead of stressed. Just admit you care about each other and stop being weird about it." Clara and Ashton exchanged glances across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe the lines between friendship and something more had blurred beyond distinction. Maybe that was okay. They'd built something genuine from the rubble of that collision on Blackstone Ridge, something worth acknowledging and protecting. "You're very wise for someone so young," Clara said to Maya, and the teenager beamed. "I learned from the best," she replied, looking at both of them with obvious affection. As they finished dinner and talked about Maya's summer research and the fall semester ahead, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the hollow satisfaction of business success, but genuine happiness rooted in connection and purpose. The road ahead would have challenges. Ashton's pride would clash with Clara's instinct to solve problems with resources. Their different backgrounds would create moments of misunderstanding. But they'd proven they could navigate difficulty together, could choose connection over ego, could build something meaningful from tragedy. Blackstone Ridge had nearly ended Clara's life. Instead, it had given her a new one, richer and more authentic than anything she'd built in boardrooms. And it had given Ashton something equally valuable: proof that accepting help wasn't weakness, that connection could exist without owing, that his worth wasn't measured solely by what he could provide alone. Together, they were learning what it meant to truly live, not just survive. 2 years after that fateful night on Blackstone Ridge, Clara Jennings stood on the stage of Sterling Heights Academy's graduation ceremony, preparing to give the commencement address. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been invited not because of her business success or her wealth, but because of the scholarship program she and Ashton had built together, which had now helped over 300 students from struggling communities access quality education. In the audience, Ashton sat with Mrs. Patterson, both of them beaming with pride. Maya wasn't graduating today. She still had 2 more years at the academy, but she'd insisted on attending to support the seniors who'd become her friends and mentors. Clara caught Ashton's eye and felt the familiar warmth that had become constant in her life over the past months. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, both of them too aware of what they could lose to rush into anything careless. But 6 months ago, during a late-night conversation in Ashton's apartment while reviewing grant applications, he'd kissed her. It had been tentative, almost apologetic, as if he still couldn't quite believe someone like Clara would want someone like him. She'd kissed him back with certainty, trying to convey through action what words had failed to express. They'd been together since then, navigating the complications of merging two very different lives. Clara had sold her penthouse and bought a modest house near the academy, close enough that Ashton could walk to work and Maya could visit easily. She'd stepped back from day-to-day operations at Apex Solutions, taking a chairman role that allowed her to focus on the non-profit work she and Ashton had built together. The foundation they'd created, called Second Chances Initiative, had expanded beyond scholarships. They provided vocational training, small business loans for struggling entrepreneurs, and support services for families in crisis. Ashton had proven to be a natural at identifying genuine need and creating programs that actually helped rather than just sounding good on paper. Clara brought the resources and organizational structure. But Ashton brought the heart. As Clara began her commencement speech, she looked out at the graduates and their families. 2 years ago, I nearly died on a mountain road. My brakes failed, and I was seconds from a crash that would have ended my life. But a truck driver named Ashton Walsh saw what was happening and made a choice. He positioned his truck in my path, sacrificing everything he owned to save a stranger. She paused, letting the words settle over the audience. That night, Ashton gave me an extraordinary gift. Not just my life, but a chance to understand what life is actually for. I'd spent 20 years building a company, accumulating wealth, achieving success as the world defines it. But I was fundamentally alone, disconnected from anything that gave existence real meaning. Ashton showed me what courage looks like when you have nothing to gain and everything to lose. Clara saw Ashton shift uncomfortably in his seat, never comfortable being the focus of attention. Maya squeezed his hand, her expression radiating love and pride. The graduates sitting before you today come from all kinds of backgrounds. Some have resources and advantages. Others have fought against circumstances that would have broken most people. But every single one of you has been given gifts, talents, opportunities. The question is what you'll do with them. She thought about her own journey, from CEO focused solely on profit to someone who measured success by lives changed. I learned from Ashton and his remarkable daughter Maya that real wealth isn't counted in bank accounts. It's measured in connections made, in people helped, in the courage to act when action is costly. It's measured in the communities we build and the hands we reach out to those who need them. The speech continued, touching on responsibility, service, and the importance of using privilege to create opportunity for others. But Clara's mind was partly on the conversation she and Ashton had shared the previous evening. They'd been discussing the future, about what came next for them personally and professionally. Ashton had surprised her by suggesting they expand the foundation nationally, creating a network of support that could reach thousands of families like his own had been. "You're sure?" Clara had asked. It would mean a lot of travel, a lot of time away from Maya. Ashton had smiled, that expression of contentment she'd come to cherish. Maya's going to college in 2 years. She's already been accepted to 3 different advanced mathematics programs. She doesn't need me hovering over her anymore. And besides, this work we're doing, it matters, Clara. It matters more than anything I've ever done. I want to do more of it. They'd talked late into the night about possibilities, about reaching communities across the country, about building something that would outlast them both. Clara had fallen asleep on Ashton's couch, her head on his shoulder, feeling more at peace than she'd ever felt in her expensive penthouse. As the graduation ceremony concluded and graduates threw their caps into the air, Clara descended from the stage to where Ashton and Maya waited. Maya hugged her first, then stepped back with a knowing grin. "Great speech, but you got a little emotional when you talked about Dad. Very obvious, just so you know." Clara laughed. "Your father makes me emotional. I've accepted that about myself." Ashton pulled her close, and Clara felt the solidity of him, the steady presence that had become her anchor. "You made us sound too heroic," he murmured. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Clara corrected gently. "You did what you would do. That's what makes it extraordinary." They walked together through the campus, Maya chattering about her upcoming summer plans, another research position, this time at a university closer to home. She'd grown into a stunning young woman, brilliant and compassionate, carrying the best of both her parents' qualities. Mrs. Patterson had prepared a celebratory dinner at her bakery, which had become something of a tradition for important occasions. The four of them, Clara, Ashton, Maya, and the elderly baker who'd shown kindness when it mattered most, gathered around a table laden with food. They talked and laughed, sharing stories and making plans, a makeshift family bound not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. Later that evening, as Clara and Ashton walked alone through Creekwood's quiet streets, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From that terrifying moment of brake failure to this peaceful small-town evening, everything had changed. She'd lost nothing that actually mattered and gained everything she'd been missing. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Putting your truck in my path? Losing everything you'd worked for?" Ashton stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Every day, I'm grateful I made that choice. Not because of what came after, the scholarship or the foundation, or even us. I'm grateful because in that moment, I was the person I wanted to be. Someone who chose human life over personal cost. That's worth more than any truck or job." Clara kissed him then, standing under the street light in the town where he'd nearly lost everything. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily despite her history of emotional guardedness. "I love who you are, who you've helped me become, the life we're building together." Ashton's eyes glistened with emotion. "I love you too. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Clara. Maybe more. You gave Maya and me a future we never could have imagined. You gave me back the ability to hope." As they continued their walk, Clara thought about the speech she'd given earlier, about second chances and the courage to act. Life had given her an unexpected gift on Blackstone Ridge, wrapped in terror and collision, but ultimately transformative. She'd set out to repay a debt, and instead had found her purpose, her partner, and a family she'd built rather than been born into. The foundation would continue growing, helping more families escape the kind of desperation Ashton had known. Maya would go on to brilliant things, carrying forward the lessons of resilience and compassion she'd learned from her father. And Clara would spend her days doing work that actually mattered, surrounded by people she genuinely loved. Sometimes salvation came in the form of brake failure, and a truck driver willing to sacrifice everything for a stranger. Sometimes it took losing your way completely to find the path you were meant to walk all along. Clara Jennings had been given a second chance at life on that mountain road, and she intended to spend every remaining day proving worthy of the gift Ashton Walsh had given her. Their story had started with a collision, but it had become something far more beautiful. A testament to the power of human connection, the possibility of redemption, and the truth that sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most. Together, They were building something that would last, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.